Okay, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Today is Wednesday, or is today Thursday? No, today's Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday, April 7th, 2021. I really should start checking the dates right before I press record, but anyways, there's a fair amount to report today in the news, so let's jump right into it. We're going to be talking about stuff all over the world in terms of what's going on globally, So first off, Yahoo Answers is shutting down after 15 years. I mean, to be honest with you guys, lately when surfing the internet, I haven't been on Yahoo Answers as much as I used to be. I know that for me, it used to be like one of the first things that popped up on Google and stuff. I don't really use Google anymore to begin with, but I mean, Yahoo Answers over the years has helped me out for a lot of stuff. Nothing like super important, but just small significant things like kind of, I guess you could say, life hacks if you want to call it. So again, it's sad to see when that stuff doesn't do well, but I think, or when they shut it down, but I mean, there's now, I think it's called Quora, I think is the website, but you can only like check, one or two answers a day until you have to subscribe or something. But anyways, they seem to be doing well. Maybe that's why. I don't know the specifics, nor do I honestly care. It's unfortunate to see Yahoo Answers shutting down. But anyways, the next thing is that Arkansas in the United States has become the first state to prohibit physicians from providing gender-affirming treatment for trans people under the age of 18. So to translate that in plain English, it basically means that if you're under the age of 18 and you want to do a sexual transition from a woman to a man or a man to a woman, within Arkansas, physicians and doctors cannot prescribe you if I'm not mistaken, the hormone therapy, I think it is, in order to do the conversion in terms of like the genetic side of things or the biological side. Again, I'm not a biologist or a doctor. Okay. When it comes to the political side of it, here's the thing about all of that. I have an interesting take on this because there's one side of the perspective, which is that, you know, there's the generally the conservative side that will say, look, we're not against transgenders, but we believe in raising a child until they're legally of age, between 18, 19, 20 to make that decision. There's other countries around the world who have absolutely no problem with transgender people and the trans community. However, they believe that, the decision should be made after someone becomes a young adult and their childhood should not be affected. Now, the question then becomes, what do these countries and what do these people and politicians mean when they use the word affected, right? I'll give you an example. I have family friends, for example, where their kids are 7 or 8 years old. I kid you not, this is a personal thing of mine, a family friend, and I believe their kid is 8 years old, I think, and he's a guy, but he wants to be a woman. He's already painting his nails and stuff like that. So look, I mean, I have no issue with, again, as you all know, anyone of color, transgender, lesbians, gays, you name it. It's just the question becomes, when is someone mature enough to make that decision, because it will be a permanent decision, right? And I understand that. So the question becomes, if you have a son who's 11 or 12 years old, does he, if he wants to transition to being a woman, should you allow him to do that at such a young age? You know what I mean? And both sides could be argued from a clinical psychological standpoint, from my understanding. I'm not going to pretend like I know everything about that, but it seems like, generally speaking, ultimately what's happening here is that it's kind of like, well, if the child wants to transition, let them transition. But one side of the argument is, well, it's going to disrupt their childhood and how they were brought up. Others will argue, actually, it might damage them if they don't transition. So, I mean, look, in my humble opinion, I take the perspective, although I do understand the other side, I take the perspective of let them grow up until they're 18, 19 and then make that decision. And if they start saying it at 15, 16, that, or, even younger, that they want to transition, no problem. But wait until you're 18, 19 to fully, make that decision and say, okay, no problem. With that being said, that's generally where I lean to. However, I have no problem being convinced the other way around if there's new studies or new anything that would come forward to suggest that maybe the opposite would be best or better in some cases, right? But again, I think these types of situations are also circumstance by circumstance. So generally, I lean a little more conservative here, but again, my mind's always open to being changed. The next thing is that Meghan Markle and Harry's Netflix series has been announced, and that is the most that I'm going to say on that. The next thing is that Amazon is trying to implement tech that senses and precisely detects how many times their drivers yawn. Like literally how many times they yawn. Okay, so Amazon's been under a lot of heat lately for trying to prevent, unionization, specifically across the United States, but even around the world, but mainly in the States. I know that they're unionized in other countries too, but here's the thing, guys. I don't understand from a purely mathematical perspective. If the workers want to unionize, let them unionize. I mean, I understand that, business owners and all that don't like unions, but Amazon is right up there with Walmart and Apple in terms of, the richest companies on the freaking planet. You know what I mean? I'm honestly, I'm not trying to be a Republican or Democrat here. I'm just trying to be like myself. Like, you don't have the money to dish out for people if they want to unionize? I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some cases where unions may not work, and I understand that. But in this case, if there's an overwhelming amount of workers that say they want to unionize, let them unionize. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because people are complaining online on Twitter that, the Amazon drivers have to, pardon my English, they have to piss in bottles, men and women. They have to defecate or, take shits in plastic bags in their trucks. And Amazon said on Twitter, yeah, well, this is because the long driving conditions, the rural suburban areas, there's no places to actually go use a restroom. Meanwhile, it turns out that the drivers have come out and said collectively, sort of like a union, even though they're not one, they've come out and said basically by signing petitions, no, that's not true. It's not that there aren't bathrooms near us. It's that we're not given the time, and there's technology in these trucks that can sense that. Now, I don't know how far Amazon has gone in terms of implementing this technology to sense how many times you yawn and stuff like that. But I mean, that's insane. I mean, I understand that the demand is high for people ordering from Amazon, but that's not an excuse to treat human beings like freaking slaves. You know what I mean? These people are just trying to make a living, because if they didn't need to work for a living or, do this job, I would bet you they wouldn't most of the time. Right? Because if you told me that I got to go to a job where I might be pissing in bottles and shitting in bags, I mean, look, I'll be honest. If I had to put up, it depends how much I'm getting paid. I'm not gonna lie. Like, if you told me, like, I would do it if I was getting paid big money. But I think relative to what these Amazon drivers are getting paid, I don't think it's enough. And people might be saying, "Oh, Dave, you'll shit in a bag and piss in a bottle." You know what? For the right amount of money, I would. But it clearly these Amazon drivers are not getting paid well enough for that to be the case. You know what I mean? So the next thing is that Chinese TV stations have started blurring out any Western brands on their TV network. So like any actors or whatever on these TV shows in China wearing Nike hoodie or anything from North America in general, they're blurring out. And I think even some brands from Europe as well too. I mean, hey, look, it's their country. They could do what they want. It's the CC, and I don't mean the Chinese people. Again, I'm talking about the CCP, the regime. Again, this is only going to escalate tensions between Asia and the West, specifically China, of course. And look, I mean, maybe they'll start unblurring certain brands from their show if tensions calm down and stuff like that. But I don't see that happening anytime soon, right? So it'll be interesting to see, because again, they have their own, if I'm not mistaken, they have their own version of Google, their own version of Facebook. Facebook and them are not allowed or inside of China, from my understanding. I don't think Google is, but if they are, I think it's to an extremely limited extent, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, hey, can you imagine if Facebook got into China? That would be insane. They basically run the whole, I mean, I'm not trying to defend China here, but Facebook would have a much tighter grasp on the world in general, because, I mean, look at how many people are in China, right? Which is, to a degree, I can understand why the CCP didn't want Facebook in there to begin with. And I know it's for, my reasoning is for different reasons than the CCP, obviously. They want to keep the control. For me, I think it's good because the tech giants do not have control over every single major country. You know what I mean? They have control over most, but countries like China and Iran and stuff, they don't. So the next thing is that Iran had a cargo boat that they finally admitted allegedly that acts as a spy boat because it's just been there for so long. It's basically a cargo boat is the front, is like the cover for it. But what it really is a spy ship for their Revolutionary Guard Army, which is their version of, I honestly don't know. I want to say NORAD, but I don't even think so. I think it's just, their Revolutionary Guard has to do with like elite soldiers and stuff like that. I guess, I don't know, their version of the Navy SEAL. I honestly, I don't even want to make comparisons because I tried to look into this and I can't even tell. It's just their own version of like an elite army unit with, I think, 100,000 soldiers in there. But anyways, allegedly, Israel bombed this ship, this spy ship, and they're saying it was Israel. Iran is saying that. Who knows? I wouldn't put it past the fact that it's Israel. I'm not going to lie. With that being said, though, this all happened while Meanwhile, the Iranian officials are in Vienna having talks with European and world nations on the reestablishing some type of nuclear deal. And speaking of which, that leads me to my next point, which is that the U.S. has now, ever coincidentally and quietly, slipped into joining the other major world countries with the Iran nuclear talks and engagements again, because obviously Trump backed out of it. Now, here's the thing. I said this from the beginning, and the beginning is only, I think, 3 or 4 days ago in my eyes, but I knew the U.S. was, I don't want to say using, but they were pulling the strings of other countries to say, yes, start a deal and we'll slowly step in and act like we weren't the ones pulling the strings. I have without a doubt in my mind that it was the CIA that basically arranged this type of formulation of, the U.S. didn't approach Iran at first, but they're coming in now slowly, so to negotiate and to talk. So that's what I see happening there. The next thing is that AstraZeneca is under even further inspection by the EU, the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine, and the UK, but alternatives are now being offered for people under the age of 30 because apparently people are having some serious issues, especially younger people, with the AstraZeneca vaccine. And what do you know? Most of the vaccines within Canada, where I live, is AstraZeneca. Now, not that I was going to take it to begin with. You all know my stance on that, but so I won't reiterate it. But ultimately, I mean, look, if there are serious issues, I'm not a doctor, but if there are serious issues, then there's serious issues. And ultimately, we won't know the long-term effects of this unless I'm wrong, but we won't know the long-term effects of this until time itself proves to be the case. You know what I mean? Now, again, to be honest, I would dare to say, and this is just my humble opinion, I'm more afraid of the vaccine than the virus itself. Assuming the virus is real, assuming the mutated versions are real. With that being said, though, again, this whole thing with AstraZeneca, there's all these problems. Now, apparently there's a more than likely chance that the virus started in the lab and that whole thing. So I don't even want to give my full-on opinion or just keep rambling on about it because there's new things coming out every day. One country doubts something. The next country doesn't. The next one doubts it again. Then the WHO says something. Then the CDC contradicts the WHO. You guys see what I'm saying? It's just a part of my English. It's a clusterfuck. So, at this point, I don't know how much I can say. Or how much all of us can think or say, The next thing is that Kim Jong-un said that North Korea is facing its worst ever situation, and he called on grassroots organizers to help push forward the 5-year economic plan. Well, I mean, look. If I'm not mistaken, I remember Kim Jong-un blatantly admitting that his 5-year economic plan had failed. Here's the thing. The country's got sanctions on it like there's no tomorrow, but it's not even always about that. I think the sanctions in a lot of ways are a front in many regards. What I mean is this. When you look at North Korea, the soldiers, Kim Jong-un's own soldiers, are starving. You could see how thin they are. This is not a good country to live in. Most of the country, if I'm not mistaken, of its population are starving. People try to escape to South Korea all the time. Some of them make it, some of them don't. So I don't know, what Kim Jong-un is doing here. Now, unless I'm missing something that you could all correct me on, I'd be more than happy. But as of right now, from what I'm reading and seeing, I don't know what Kim Jong-un is saying. These people can barely eat. I don't know how the hell they're going to organize some type of political coalition to start something. And I literally mean that. These people don't have energy in them, and I feel very terrible for them. It's very sad. The next thing is that Italian business owners are protesting in front of the Italian parliament to protest against the lockdown again. I mean, look, people all over the world are sick and tired. It's very, very simple. And I've said this before, and all you know this too. I mean, I'm sick and tired, and I'm not even not even about hearing about it, honestly. It's more so that, lockdown, then no lockdown, then restrictions, no restrictions. One doctor or one group of doctors say one thing, the next group says another. The amount of information coming out is second by second, and it's constantly changing. And we're finding now through this that there's a lot more, we could say, deep-rooted or deep-seated corruption than we had initially thought within establishments and institutions like the CDC and the WHO. And we know that. It's not even a conspiracy at this point, right? The next thing is that CBS is standing by its reporting after allegedly splicing and manipulating a 60-minute story on Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. Well, look, the mainstream media splices things all the time. I have yet to see this 60 Minutes report just because I haven't had the time, but I would like to see how much they edited and spliced and things like that. For Ron DeSantis to be taking a stance against this, it's either one of two things. If we look at this neutrally, he's either got something to hide, or 60 Minutes did do a poor job of manipulating and trying to convince the public of something that was not true, right? By just taking certain clips out of context and you name it. So again, at the end of the day, I think when we look at that, it's honestly, more than anything else, I would classify that as culture wars. But here's the thing. A justified version of culture wars. And I know most people say culture wars is not necessary and it's, wasting time and it's just causing a lot of infighting. And to a large extent, I agree. With that being said, though, I think someone like Ron DeSantis has the absolute right to defend himself. And if CBS wants to stand by their reporting, then so be it. I mean, I guess that's what it is. This is the risk nowadays that you take with doing interviews with the mainstream media, because 20, 30 years ago, if you were a celebrity, a politician, and you did a mainstream media interview or whatever, you knew what you were going to talk about. It was more of a closed-in echo chamber, so to speak. Nowadays, the questions are more free-rolling because the mainstream media is trying to, adapt to the online culture and stuff like that. It seems to be the case. And people like politicians and celebrities are not ready for every question thrown at them as they used to be. And to be honest, I like that because it holds these, politicians and public figures in check. But here's the thing, though. If you throw curveball questions, which are, appropriately curveball questions, but then you edit it and splice it after to make them look bad when you already threw them a question they weren't expecting. I mean, the whole point of being a public figure is to answer questions on the spot. So I'm not even saying to pre-prepare the questions, but you cannot edit it. You have to show the full answer. That's why generally speaking, like when I record the episodes for the afternoon or the main episodes of the show, I always do, and I'm not saying this to brag, I'm saying this because I believe in transparency. I don't edit anything except for like the pictures, obviously, that I put up, but I always do the first take. The first recording, the first take is all I do, and that's it, because I believe in authenticity. Because if I start editing and splicing, what makes me any different than the mainstream media corporations? Do you know what I'm saying? That's what I believe in. Just like with the live streams and all that stuff, we should not be removing anything, regardless if it's controversial or not. If it's controversial, we'll deal with it later. And if it isn't, then we move on. You know what I mean? The next thing is that affordable housing markets are allegedly being destroyed in the United States. I mean, even in the West too. Yeah, even here too. The next thing is that Kim Kardashian is now officially a billionaire. We are moving on from that. I am not spending more than 3 seconds covering that. The next thing is that the U.S. joins... okay, no, I brought that up already. Sorry. The final thing is that Netanyahu has been asked by the Israeli president. Now, keep in mind, Netanyahu is the Israeli prime minister. There's president and prime minister. So Netanyahu has been asked by the Israeli president to form a new Israeli government. And this is interesting because I think there's a play here to try to keep Netanyahu in power. I think Netanyahu, regardless of what you think of him, I think behind the scenes, he has too many, I guess we could say, people of power backing him, I would dare to say. I don't want to speak on behalf of the people of Israel with regards to this recent election. Apparently, Netanyahu's corruption trial is just starting, which is not going to look good on him and stuff like that. Here's the thing. I don't know exactly how Israeli politics works, and so I want to be very careful and respectful when saying this, but I think the reason why Netanyahu keeps winning over and over, even after gridlock and deadlock elections, is because the people of Israel, and I could be very wrong here, but this is what I would envision. The people of Israel want you to look them in the eye and tell them, I can keep you safe. You know what I mean? Because Israel geographically is surrounded by all their enemies. So I would dare to say that that's what a lot of people want. Now, yes, could it be argued that Netanyahu overextends his boundaries, like allegedly, the $3 billion that the U.S. gives Israel every year, allegedly is technically not needed, and Netanyahu uses that $3 billion to just go and bomb to bomb all the countries around him? Does he overreach in terms of offensive actions? I think in some cases, absolutely. But I think in other cases, it's very unfortunate, but I think in other cases, a sign of strength is needed to be shown. If you're surrounded constantly by your enemies and you're going to sleep at night, literally knowing that you have multiple adversaries or people that don't like you just down the road, not literally, but, with a simple plane flight, you know what I mean? You can easily reach a certain part of your enemy's land. It's tough. It's tough. It's hard to balance that. So I understand both sides. But anyways, that's it for today, and we'll catch you all later. Cheers.